So, you want to get into endgame content in Final Fantasy XIV, but you have no idea where to start. You have no idea how to gear, you have no idea what the first thing you should do in. What's an extreme trial? What's an unreal trial? What's savage? What's ultimate? Well, hopefully this video will help you figure out at least a little bit of that. I'm going to generally talk about gearing for endgame content in general. I'm going to be talking about a little bit of BIS. For those of you who don't know, BIS stands for best in slot. We're talking about the quote-unquote order you should try out in-game content in. I say quote-unquote because, you know, your mileage may vary. And I'm just going to generally talk about endgame a little bit. Endgame in terms of the hardest rating experience that 14 has to offer. So, let's jump right into it. Alright, so you might be confused as to why I'm at a market board. Well, this is your best friend when you're first gearing for endgame content. Because crafted gear, this stuff right here, high quality crafted gear, is the first thing that you're typically going to want to get your hands on when you're trying out endgame content. The highest level of crafted gear, in this case for this patch, which is 6.28, I think, pretty sure, it is the Renascita? This gear, this name right here, Rinascita. This gear set is the highest eye level gear. It is 20 eye level below the cap of gear that you will be able to get for the patch. Later on, they will allow you to augment this gear and make it be eye level 620, which will be only 10 eye level under the highest level of the patch. But when you're first buying it, typically off the market board or crafting it yourself if you have crafters leveled, I'm assuming you don't if you're watching this video, but the idea is there, it will be 20 eye level under whatever the max is. When you first start doing endgame content, you typically want to buy a full armor set of this. And by full armor set, I mean everything on the left side, everything on the right side, and your weapon. Because it will be the highest eye level available to you easily. Now, pricing-wise, it's actually gone down quite a bit. You might think 200,000 gil is a lot for armor, but that's actually a lot lower than it used to be. It used to be upwards of like 1 million gil a piece. So it's actually quite a bit cheaper right now because we are later on into the patch cycle. We are at the 0.28 as opposed to just the 0.2 flat. Whenever a new patch comes out that has new crafted gear in it, it's usually very expensive, so keep that in mind if you're doing this right when a new patch launches. And, like I said, this is the current best gear for patch 6.2 or 6.28, whichever one we're actually on, and the gear name will change. As you can see, the same thing happened in previous things. For example, for the Shadowbringers gear, at first it was the Facet Mail, and then it was the Nearest Guardian top, and then it was the Exarchic Mail, for Dragoon specifically. It changed every major patch where a new raid got launched. See, there was a new armor set for every one. It jumps by a good chunk of eye level. Make sure you are buying the most recent set if you are trying to do new endgame content. Now, one of the things about crafted gear that makes it really good to start out with is 1, it's high eye level. 2, it can be overmelded. Now, what is overmelding? If you don't have a crafter level, this doesn't apply to you, but the basic idea is that you can overmeld gear that is crafted gear by applying extra materia that you normally would not be able to apply to it. So for example, I could meld an extra plus 36 onto this chest piece, and then 2 extra plus 12s after that. I believe I have a piece of pentamelded gear I can show off. My striking chest piece should still be pentamelded, if I can find it. There we go. So the idea is that because this gear is crafted, it is unique in the fact that you can overmeld onto it, you can add extra materia, which will give you higher base stats. It is something else that is important about gearing for endgame content. Make sure you are melding your gear if you're going into endgame content. I personally view that as a very important thing. Speaking of stuff while we're at the market board, food and potions. If you don't know what food to buy, go to the meals tab. Typically, look for the ones that are the most wanted at the moment, or the ones that are the highest in the stats that you know that you need. Right now, once again, current patch, carrot pudding is the one that most people are buying. It is determination and critical hit rate food. There's also sunset carrot nibbles, which is critical hit skill speed food. If you need skill speed, you buy this food. And there's melon pie, which is direct hit determination food, which is used by a couple of jobs right now. Not as many as use carrot pudding, but it is used by a couple. There's also Garlean pizza for your spell speed critical hit needs. Make sure you're buying the food for your job. If you're running a job that doesn't need skill speed, buy, crit det food. If you're running a job that needs skill speed, buy your crit skill speed food, for example. Also, make sure you buy potions. Potions are under the medicine tab. They're typically kind of hard to find because, as you can see, as you keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, it takes until here for you to finally find your tinctures. Right now, we are in grade 7 tinctures. This will change with each patch. I've made the mistake in the past of thinking that the level of tincture didn't change with each patch, and I bought way too many of the old kind, but that's an entirely different story. Bottom line is look for whatever is the most recent potion, and you will use that inside of your openers. For example, I have other videos on the channel about that if you don't know what I mean by potions or podding. I have an entire video dedicated to it, I believe. Make sure that if you're in in-game content, you have potions, you have food, and you are ready to use both of them anytime you are doing said content. I believe that falls under gearing, personally. If you're not bringing potions and food, you are not actually geared for endgame content. So speaking of gearing, the next thing after your crafted gear is you want to come and get tombstone gear. Now make sure that when you're getting your tombstone gear, you pay attention to whatever your best in slot is, or your BIS. This is something that I will talk about after the gearing section, but just keep that idea in mind that you don't just buy everything from the tombstone gear vendor, you'll only buy certain pieces for your job. As for its location, we are in Rods at Han right now. There is the aetheryte, you can see it right there. You walk through the door, go through the left door as you're looking this way, and the vendor is right here. You will buy stuff from them for Tomestones of Causality. This is your weekly capped tome. It's the tome that you can only get 450 of each week. And you use these tomes to buy this gear. It is only eye level 620, so it is not all the way at the cap, but there is a way to augment said gear through Savage. Or eventually through other means, but we'll talk as if that doesn't exist yet. The way that you augment it is through these Savage drops, Brine for weapon augmentation, Twine for armor augmentation, and Shine for accessory augmentation. All of that is stuff that drops from Savage from fights 6 and 7 of this tier, but it is the second and third fights of the grouping. So, for example, last tier it dropped from the second circle and third circle, respectively. The Shine dropped here, and then the Twine and Brine dropped there. And from the current tier, the Shine drops here, and the Twine and Brine drops here. That's how you augment this gear. That's how you make it be the maximum level that it can be. There are only certain pieces you want to buy, but however, they are a big step up over the purchased gear. For example, even if the substats are not right, like they aren't on this piece, you can see that like it has better base stats, it has better defense, it has better health in general. So overall, it is going to be an upgrade over your crafted gear, so it is the next thing you should be looking at, but make sure you're buying the proper pieces for your BIS. I nearly forgot about this again. Every time I recorded that last part, I nearly forgot about this. Weapons are something you can also buy for tomestones. However, there's a big asterisk around them. You need an ultralight tomestone for this gear. The tomestone will be called different things in other patches, but for this gear, you need an ultralight tomestone. It is something that will either drop from the second fight of the tier, so in this case, the 6th circle. It will drop from the end chest, or you can get it from the normal raids if you clear 7 weeks in a row the final fight of the tier. Final fight of the tier drops an item currently called at least, an Unsung Blade of Abyssos. When you have 7 of them, you can buy an ultralight tomestone, and then you can buy the weapon. That weapon is also augmentable. I have one in here somewhere. There it is. I have the augmented samurai sword, for example. It will not be your best weapon typically. There have been a few exceptions. It'll typically not be your best weapon, but it is a higher eye level weapon that you can get your hands on. Alright, let's talk about the Savage gear in general. Now, Savage gear only drops from, believe it or not, Savage. So, only certain items drop from certain fights. So, the right side drops from fight 1. The boots, gloves, hat drop from fight 2. The pants drop from fight 3. And the weapon and chest piece will drop from fight 4. Or, 5, 6, 7, or, 7, 8, 9. The idea is that it is the first, second, third, and fourth fight of the tier. That might not necessarily be the title of the fight, for example. Now, you do not have to get it to drop from the final chest. There is a chance that you can have the item that you want drop, but it is all randomized loot. Outside of a couple of pieces here and there, for example, there will always be augment materials that drop from the second and third fights of the tier, and there will always be pants from the third fight, and there will always be a weapon and chest piece from the final fight. The rest of it can be pretty randomized, so you're not guaranteed to get it. However, on the plus side, each time you clear the fight, you get a book for said fight. A book from 1, book from 2, book from 3, and book from 4, or 5, 6, 7, 8, or 7, 8, 9, or whatever. You get the idea. That version of the fight of the tier. Now you can eventually buy a piece of gear for that, and once again, just make sure you're buying the pieces for your BIS or your best in slot. Don't just buy everything, because that isn't always the best gear for you, dear viewer. Alright, now what is best in slot? Well, best in slot is the best gear for your job. Typically, it is something that you can find online. Most people just go to the Balance Discord. The Balance Discord has a bunch of resources for jobs anyway, so I highly recommend you're a part of it if you are trying to get into endgame stuff anyways. But if nothing else, it does have a giant collection of whatever the best in slot for your job is. For example, as you can see, I have a mismatch of different gear from Savage and from Purchased right now. I have like Abyssos ring, but Augmented Luna's Envoy other ring, Abyssos bracelet, but then necklace and earrings are from purchasing with tomestones. My gloves are purchasing with tomestones, but everything else on my left side is going to be from Savage. I haven't cleared the final fight of the tiers, so my chest piece and weapon are wrong still, but when I clear, I will have the proper chest piece and weapon. But the bottom line is you want to go and find out what your BIS is and make sure you're buying the right stuff for it, because stuff will not always match. You can kind of make educated guesses over what you need. For example, on Dragoon, you can more or less make educated guesses of, okay, well, let's look at the Savage gear for Dragoon. If I look at Dragoon, okay, well, the earrings have det D hit, but then the purchased earrings have crit det. Those are probably better. The necklace has skill speed. Well, Dragoon doesn't like skill speed. I'll go buy the necklace instead. The bracelets are crit D hit. That's like perfect. The purchased bracelets have skill speed anyway, so I'd rather have the crit D hit. And then you typically have one of each ring anyway, so you'll get one of each ring. You can kind of make educated guesses yourself like that, but I highly recommend going and finding an online resource that has done the math for you already and can tell you what it is. Your BIS will also typically include a food. For example, for Dragoon, it's carrot pudding. And it'll probably tell you what potions to use. Typically, they just say use the most recent potions, because that is always BIS. It's always the most recent, highest level potion that you can get. They'll also tell you how to meld your armor properly. The melds are wrong for Dragoon, because that right side is melded for my Samurai, with the minor little bits and pieces of skill speed included. Make sure that you are hunting towards your BIS as time goes on. Make sure that if you are doing Savage, you're grabbing the right pieces. If you're not doing Savage, make sure you're at least spending your causality on the right pieces. And that if you do buy extra pieces of purchased armor, that you do not buy pieces that are bad for you. What do I mean by that? Well, for example, I'm going to use Samurai as an example here. The boots, for example, are Determination Skill Speed, which is just kind of a bad stat combo for Samurai in general, unless you really, 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 really need some skill speed. So you'd probably just not want to get these at all. Right? And the same can be kind of said. I click the item comparison button again. Thank you. For the face guard of striking here. Well, it's Determination Direct Hit. That's not a terrible stat combo, but you'd really rather have your Savage hat. So you probably don't want to buy this at all, and would rather just wait till you start clearing Savage and buy the proper piece. But these are eye level upgrades, and eye level upgrades and base stat upgrades over crafted gear can often be a lot better, even if it is not the right stats for you. But viewer discretion advised. I highly recommend just following your BIS and leaving the actual crafted gear pieces as the other slots until you can replace it with the proper items. Alright, this is my 5th time trying to record this because I keep talking for too long. We're going to try about the order in which you go into this endgame content. Now, I recommend going in the order of you learn how to do extreme and unreal content until you're fairly confident in that. You're not the person who's dying and getting dragged across the finish line, that you are not the person causing the party to wipe to enrage, and that you are not the person doing mechanics incorrectly all the time. Make sure that you are confident and comfortable in your unreal and extreme performance, and then you should hop into Savage afterwards. Now, you might be like, hang on, isn't Savage like the hardest stuff to do? No, but we'll get to that in a second. Now, if you ever want to move on from Savage, I highly recommend you are in your best in slot gear, your BIS. I highly recommend you are the type of person who can consistently clear all fights of the tier without much mechanical difficulty at all, and you're always a person who pumps damage as much as they possibly can for whatever job they are playing. And then after that, after you're at the point where you're constantly able to clear this whole tier without any problems, you could join any group and help them out, no problem. Then if you really want to get into like the true hardest content in the game, you can look into ultimate raiding. Now, what is ultimate raiding? Ultimate raiding is doing these very unique raids that are very long, typically upwards of 15 minutes, that are about certain points in time story-wise, and are also locked in time in terms of what level you can be during them. For example, Unending Coil of Bahamut, Yukab, the Weapons Refrain Ultimate, called Uwu, those are community names, I did not make them up, are both locked to level 70 and eye level locked to pretty low stuff, 375, 345. They do have their own unique BIS, so if you're going to try them, you can go and look up the BIS and see what people recommend for them, because people will recommend different things for different fights. Once again, I recommend the balance. I know the Dragoon people have lots of great resources for how to gear for Ultimate. They're very useful in that regard. There's also the Epic of Alexander, which I don't have unlocked because I never did the fight to unlock it. I probably should have before recording this video, but whatever. It's locked to level 80, and I forget the eye level, but because of that and because of the eye level sync, you use a lot of Shadowbringers gear, so be prepared to go farm out a bunch of gear if you're going to try the Epic of Alexander. There's also Dragon Song's Reprise, which is the most current Ultimate raid, which is level 90, sorry, and eye level 605 locked to. So you want to be in current BIS gear for this. Highly recommend being in your current BIS gear if you're going to try this. You can technically do it in last tier's BIS gear, so the best in slot that existed for the Escudelos 1, 2, 3, 4. But I highly recommend just being in the highest eye level BIS that you can be in, or just checking and seeing what people recommend for BIS in the balance. Some jobs will have slightly different BIS because of the way that eye level sync works. Now, something interesting about Ultimate raids that I just kind of wanted to throw in here, for those of you who don't really know what they are, they're very, very long fights, typically 15 plus minutes, and they're typically about points in time. Unending Coil of Bahamut is about the entirety of the Binding Coil of Bahamut raid series. You're technically fighting your way through the Bahamut raid series and doing a basically true ending to the Bahamut raid series. Weapons Refrain Ultimate is about fighting through the primals, so Garuda, Titan, and Ifrit, or technically Garuda, Ifrit, and Titan in that order, and then fighting through the different phases of the ultimate weapon and all of the powers that it holds. The Epic of Alexander is all about the Alexander raid series from Heavensward, and I do mean the entire Alexander raid series from Heavensward, all the way until fighting a perfected version of Alexander at the end, which is very neat and cool. And then Dragon Song's Reprise is very unique. I don't want to spoil too much about the story because it has a really cool, unique story if you don't know about it. But you're basically fighting through the end of the story of Heavensward. So Singularity Reactor, Final Steps of Faith. And then there is some extra stuff in there that makes it be different that I'm not going to spoil because it's really cool. It's really recent. The other ones have been out for a very long time, but Dragon Songs is new enough that I don't want to spoil it too much. But that's kind of like the order you should do these things in. I know I got a little rambly about Ultimates, but I think Ultimates are a really cool idea. And they're a really cool piece of aspirational content. Something you should work your way towards and aspire to be doing if you're really confident in your personal performance in Endgame. So that's kind of all I was going to talk about for this video. Hopefully that was somewhat useful. I talked a lot about gearing, and I talked a lot about like the order of stuff. And I generally talked about Endgame content as a whole. Endgame content probably isn't as scary as you think. Endgame content is a lot of fun. It is typically just more difficult in the fact that there is an enrage to whatever fight you happen to be doing. The mechanics happen a little faster and deal a little more damage, but overall it is very doable to probably anyone who watches this channel because that's kind of who I've pointed my videos towards, more or less. People who want to try and get into Endgame or are doing Endgame and want to just learn a little bit more. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, post them in the comments below. I might respond, I might not. I don't know. I'm really bad at responding to comments sometimes, and I apologize for that. I'm going to try and get better in the future. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and I hope to catch you in the next one.